They wanted to see something different, but something different saw them first. The Hills Have Eyes.
Hey everyone, Jacob here. He says, before I do my review of Hills Have Eyes 1977, I'm doing a collaboration with a buddy of mine, Dave, who has his own YouTube channel called Interpreting the Stars. If you can, he said, give him a follow. He is an awesome YouTuber. He says he does a lot of great reviews and has some of the best thumbnails you could ever imagine. I asked him if he wanted to do a collaboration with me on The Hills Have Eyes 1977 and the 2006 remake. And so we're doing this one right now, the 1977 one, which his review is happening right now. So if you can, he says, I'm gonna do his gonna do his first, and then we're gonna jump right into mine afterwards. Enjoy it, have fun.
What's up, guys? It's Dave from Interpreting the Stars on Jacob's channel for the very first time of what I hope to be plenty more, and he has asked me to join him on discussing that 1977 classic horror film, The Hills Have Eyes. So, a family traveling through Nevada has a bit of car trouble in the middle of the desert when they realize that they're being stalked by a family of cannibals that live in the wilderness, and those cannibals plan to eat them for dinner. First of all, huge shout out and thanks to Jacob for inviting me over to your channel to discuss this film that I feel like at one point or another I must have seen it, but honestly I don't remember anything about it. If so, a lot of films during this period tend to blend in together for me, especially these cannibal people that live in the wilderness. So we saw that in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in The Hills Have Eyes, and even in the Wrong Turn series. It's a very popular horror trope that definitely began here in the 70s. Funny enough, throughout watching this movie, I couldn't help think that the desert looked like Tatooine in Star Wars, and the cannibals reminded me of sand people. I mean, how far could I be off, right? It came out the same year as Star Wars. Coinky dink? I think not. Well, probably. But yeah, The Hills Have Eyes certainly is classic for a reason. You watch it in the mindset of somebody from the 70s, and I promise there's some deeply disturbing things that go on in this film that I'm sure the original audiences were terrified of what they were watching, especially because the entire thing from beginning to end is minimalist, I want to say. Not complex at all. It is what it is, so it's very easy for any audience to grasp the details of the plot. And if you were to just sit and think about what's going on here, you realize that it's not too far off of what could technically happen, other than the cannibal part. That's a bit of a stretch. I mean, think about it. A family in the middle of nowhere being attacked by violent vagrants. That's realistic enough, and I did just see a movie that did this very efficiently called Coming Home in the Dark. If you haven't seen that movie, check it out! However, in my eyes, The Hills Have Eyes is simply a product of its time, and it's not scary anymore. I don't know how you feel about it yet, Jacob. You might love it and revere it, but I found it to be mostly a chore to get through, and most of that has to do with how old it is at this point. The scares that they're going for in this film are based off of shock value alone. Shock in what the people look like and what they do. Let's look at both of those for a second. The way they look is, sure, it's off-putting, but it's not as bad as other films like it. I thought some of the stuff in Wardrobe specifically looked kind of dumb. You can tell by the poster of the movie and its sequels that they kind of want to focus on the character of Pluto, because he kind of looks a bit strange. But he's not exactly the main bad guy in my opinion. He's just one of them. But he looks the weirdest, arguably. So he's on the poster. Here's my problem with that. From my experience in 2021, if somebody looks different than you, I think we've kind of gotten to a point where we're more accepting of that. Think about Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street. What's a part of what makes him so scary? His burned skin look, right? Well, that part right now is also not as scary because burned victims in real life aren't scary. And honestly, I think that's great that that's where we've come. But it also means that the people in this movie are no longer scary based off of what they look like. So we move on to what they do. And some things that they do is creepy, like when they stole the baby and they called it a Thanksgiving turkey. anything with harm to a child is disturbing, but everything else that they do is honestly kind of bland in comparison to anything else that comes out right now in 2021. The best thing that this film has going for it is honestly the title, The Hills Have Eyes. That's one of the best horror titles I think I've ever heard. But the movie itself is filed under no longer relevant, a product of its time, unfortunately. I hope you enjoyed it more than I did though, Jacob, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. But first, my score. From a technical, unbiased vantage point, this is something that I'd consider pretty bland overall. Nothing really shouts out as great or bad, it just is. And while you're watching, you'll certainly be able to tell that it's something that definitely came out in the 70s. But honestly, everything here is safe decision after safe decision for an unbiased score of 58%. My bias score, just how I personally felt about it, is right around there. Maybe lower because I think it's just a boring movie that I don't care to see again. I do think the remake will be better because the main issue that I had with this film was that it was a product of its time. Now, the remake is now 15 years old on its own, so maybe it'll have the same issue. I don't know. Only time can tell. This bias score is 52%. When we combine the two scores together, we come into the final rating of 55%, 55 out of 100 possible stars, or a C- letter grade. One more time, big thanks to Jacob for inviting me today, and until the next one, peace out!
Thank you, Dave, so much for collabing with me on this. I'm grateful. I can't wait to have you on for more and more video reviews. Thank you so much. And now, on to my review. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977, is written and directed by Wes Craven, and it is produced by Peter Look, who made Last House on the Left with Wes Craven as well. This is actually, I believe, Wes Craven's second feature, or maybe his third feature. I know he made Swamp Thing. I don't know if this is after or before. I think this is before Swamp Thing. But I know that Wes Craven wrote and directed this movie, and Peter Locke produced this movie. In fact, Peter Locke also played a character called Mercury, which he doesn't have a big role, Mercury, in the movie. I think he's just really someone that gets killed by a dog, and that's it. But it's still, I mean, it's great that he got to play that character, got to be involved with the movie besides, you know, just being a producer, so that's great too. The movie stars Suzanne Lehner, Robert Houston, Martin Spear, Dee Wallace, who is a huge horror icon, Russ Grieve, John Stedman, Michael Berryman, who also huge horror icon, and Virginia Vincent. The movie is essentially about a family that's traveling, he said, that's traveling across country, and they're basically trying to go find an old gold, like an old mine, like a gold mine in Mexico, and like they go down, so they stop and get gas somewhere, and the guy tells them, like, you know, the guy who runs the station's like, look, don't go down there, you know, just keep going to California or whatever. And so they're like, no, we're gonna go find this. He said, we're gonna go down there, we've been down there before. And they're like, no, don't go down there. And of course they go down there, and then of course, because of some stupid interference with Air Force planes going by, you know, they drive off road, and their axis is broken, and they get stranded there. And so the dad goes to get some help, and then of course turns out there are hills people that live up in the hills, cannibalistic hills people who are hell-bent on stealing and eating people and lots of other things, you know. The movie itself is not a very good movie. I mean, I do have The Hills Have Eyes, but that's not the original one. I love the 2006 remake, and the 2006 remake, in my opinion, is more better. Like, there are certain movies, that original movies that come out, you appreciate that they're for being there because they got you. It's kind of like they kept the fire warm for the good version. I always feel like the Hills Have Eyes remake is a better version of that movie, because even though Wes Craven, don't get me wrong, is a fantastic filmmaker, he's made some great films in the past, I just feel like The Hills Have Eyes is not really a great film. Like, there is even a scene in Evil Dead, the original, where you see a poster ripped of the movie, and I always thought it was like a homage, but it turns out it was Sam Raimi taking a rip at like a playful rip at Wes Craven. And Wes Craven then, of course, did a rip in Nightmare on Elm Street of Nancy falling asleep to Sam Raimi's Evil Dead. So, and then of course in Evil Dead 2, Sam Raimi then put someone, I don't know if it's somebody from that production from Evil Dead 2, or somebody somehow got a hold of Freddy Krueger's blood that was stolen from the set of Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was hanging, and then they put it, Sam Raimi put it in a scene in the shed when Bruce Campbell goes to get weapons in Evil Dead 2. So I thought that was always neat to know. But yeah, there's always, but because Hills Have Eyes is not really a great film. Like, it's not, like, I was watching it, like, I saw Dave, who's got a review, his reviews, you know, you just saw, he even said it's not that great. Like, it's not a very great movie. In fact, he said there's, you know, it's not even, you know, like, which, I mean, that's, you know, and it's our opinion. Like, there's just, I agree with him on his opinion, though, because it's like, it's not, like, I like the 2006 remake much better. Like, I don't really like this version. Like, in fact, the only reason I want to do, like, this version and not the 2006 version first was because I kind of wanted to explain, like, show you the difference. Is like, you know, because we were talking about, like, oh, you know, there is some differences. Like, there's one huge difference in the 2006 movie versus this movie. Like, in this one, they don't look monsterish. Like, they just look like people, you know, that just have some scars. While in the other one, they're deformed cannibals, you know, from, like, nuclear bombs. And so, like, you know, I was like, you know, so, like, I think this version, you know, you kind of see, like, you know, like, there are people, and I suspect Wes Craven wanted to make them look monsterish, because there's some dialogue in the movie where, like, at the beginning of the movie, one of the girl from the hills, that's so stupid sometimes. She's in the hills. He says, did you know The Weeknd has a song? I did not know. When I was doing some research on this movie, The Weeknd has a song called The Hills, which is a reference to Wes Craven's movie. I'm like, he must really like The Hills Have Eyes. I wonder if he knows that. I wonder if he's talking about the 77 or 2006 movie. I would not be shocked if he's talking about the 2006 movie. But, yeah. I did not know that. But I was just like, when I was doing research, like, what the hell? Also, here's a funny story, okay? And I feel stupid for telling the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So, I don't own the movie on Blu-ray. I don't. Because I'm not a big fan of the movie. Every year around Halloween time, I will watch it on Tubi. Because they have it on Tubi. And so, I got a new TV this past year, and that Tubi's not available on that as one of the apps. So I have to watch it on my PlayStation. Well, my PlayStation's not hooked up right now. So, I didn't feel like hooking it up. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not even, I said, I don't feel like doing it right now. I guess I was watching on my laptop. And then, as I was doing it, I'm like, maybe it's on YouTube. So I go to YouTube to watch it, and I'm like, all right, it's on there. And I watch it, and then I start scratching my head, because after I get to the very end of the movie, I'm like, there's a scene, spoilers if you've never seen the movie. The scene, the end of the movie ends with the dad getting his baby back from the Hills people and stabbing Mars to death. And it just ends him stabbing him to death, and then it just says the end, and then the screen goes red. It kind of ends like in a shocking ending, like a shock ending. And so that's what they did. Well, in which originally Wes Craven shot an ending where they reunite and they have the baby and the wolf. You know, not the wolf, the dog. What's going on with me today? I said I should call the wolf a dog. A dog a wolf, you know? You know? But yeah, so they end up reuniting and walking away, and just basically says the end, and then the screen turns red again. And I'm just thinking, that's not the ending I saw. I've seen that movie 1,000 times. That's not the ending. So then I messaged Dave. I was like, is that the ending? And he's like, no. Like, I'm like, and I was like, I showed him, this is the movie with the different ending. And I'm just like, I was like, I can't believe I just saw a different ending. And also, I scratched my head at one scene because they put a different scene. Like, they switch scenes around. Like, there's a scene where an RV blows up that's supposed to be before the guy gets stabbed to death. But that scene's after now. And I'm like, that's not... Because I was scratching my head at that. So I'm like, that scene should have been before that. But I'm like, maybe I just... It's been a year since I've seen it. Maybe I'm just losing my mind. Then I saw, like, no, I didn't. That's not the ending. And then I thought I was crazy. I went and Googled it. I had to go to Google just to check to make sure I wasn't crazy. You know, I messaged Dave. Then I went on Google, and I'm like, what the hell's wrong with this? Am I going crazy? And then I'm like, no, I'm not, okay? It's just some heckler or something took a deleted scene and then decided, hey, or maybe there is a version of this movie that just says Wes Craven preferred that ending and said, look, we're going to put that ending in there. And so that could be it, you know? But I'm just saying, if you go on YouTube to watch that movie, be leery, there is a version of that with a different ending, an alternate ending. So I'm just saying. But yeah, the movie has some good moments. Like, there is some moments where, like, practical effects I thought was great. Like, and the visual effects, there is no real visual effects, but I'm saying, like, visually the movie looks pretty good for Wes Craven movie. Like, I will say, I've never liked Last House on the Left. I understand Wes Craven really doesn't like it either because that was one of his first movies and he did not like it because it doesn't look really good. And so Wes Craven has said in past, like, that's not one of his favorite movies. I suspect it with Hills as well because he seemed really eager to remake this movie in 2006. Like, in fact, he sought out a director to remake it. So I suspect he did not like this movie, the original movie of Last House on the Left, because he was involved with both remakes. So, you would notice though, he was not involved with the Nightmare on Elm Street one. So you could tell which versions he was proud of and which movies he wasn't proud of. The ones he was involved in the remakes, yeah, he's not proud of that movie. Nightmare on Elm Street though, he wasn't involved at all. Which, in fairness, they didn't really ask Wes Craven; they just went and make it. So. But yeah, I mean, this movie does have a lot of flaws in it. Like the acting, one point I was thinking, this guy is literally acting like, and he literally, there's certain scenes where it's like, okay, your dog just got killed, and you won't tell anybody, and then he doesn't tell him to the wrong moment to where it's like way too late to tell him. Like, he's like, he gets locked out of he's, can I have the keys to the, hey, he knocks on the door and goes, I locked myself out. And then, and then before the sister was like, "This better be good." And he goes, "I locked myself out." And then like, "Oh Jesus!" And then they hand him the keys. He goes, "I just need the keys." And then they hand him the keys. He goes, he says like his dog's dead. He goes, "She died." And I'm like, "Why didn't you tell nobody?" And I'm like, "Right? Why didn't you tell somebody? If my dog died, I would have said something right then and there." Even though you have two dogs, you should at least say something, okay? I wouldn't withhold that information for later. I don't know what point you're holding that information, and other than you're just trying to basically pander the scene longer. I just don't understand. I think maybe that was the biggest thing his character arc had, was he has dog information. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, they do that same thing in the remake as well, but at least in the remake they make it more subtle, where it's like you actually... There's better reasoning behind it other than it's just like pandering. I just thought that was kind of stupid. And some of the acting in the movie's not great. Like, I'm sitting here watching it, and there's one scene where one of the Hills people is giving a speech to a dead body, and I'm sitting there just laughing because I'm just like, this is so stupid. Like, it just literally is like, we're gonna boil them up, we're gonna eat their flesh, and I'm just like, oh, we could have done another take or something. Just like, look, ease it back, man. Just ease it back. You're like, here? You need to be here. You're not Nicolas Cage. He's like maybe Nicolas Cage saw, this is pre-Nicolas Cage. Maybe Nicolas Cage saw this and goes, that's how you act. You start just making yourself loud as possible. And just, oh my God, what if Nicolas Cage would have been in that movie? Oh my God, that would have been so amazing. Just screaming crazily. That would have been great. But no, the other movie's fine. I mean, it got us to the 2006 version, so I respect it. I mean, it kept the fire warm, in which I know a lot of people do like this movie. It's not a great movie, in fact. It's not really a great movie. I mean, it's something. It's an independent movie, so I respect it for being that. It was an independent movie that, and it has a lot of good practical effects. There's a rattlesnake scene, and I'm still curious how they did the rattlesnake scene. Because I'm like, that's a real rattlesnake they're using. But are they using but then it has to bite him. Are they using a dummy snake? Or are they using like a real snake that's painted? I'm just sitting there wondering. Like, I was kind of wondering about that, But everything else kind of really looks like, practically, it looks great. The explosion, I'm so surprised. I'm like, I can't believe they blew up a real RV. And Dave was telling me, there's some similarities to Star Wars. And I'm like, and then I watched the video, and I'm like, he thinks it's coincidental, but now I'm like, you the one that said it. I'm starting to suspect too. Like, I started thinking about, I sat there this afternoon thinking, what is the similarities? I'm like, okay, they're both in the desert. They both came out at the same time around the same year. That was Dave's two conclusions. I'm thinking, then I went on further, like a rabbit hole of like conspiracy theories. I'm like, okay, they lose both their elder figures. They lose both their elder figures. A female gets taken by the bad guy. And then they blow up something at the end. And I'm like, maybe George Lucas and Wes Craven did somehow. Like maybe there is some shady stuff happening here. I'm like, maybe there is. Which, I mean, that's just me. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I'm sure it's coincidental, you know, because there is stuff that's always coincidental in life. Like, you know, sometimes movies inadvertently remake other movies, you know. Not that I'm saying that The Hills Have Eyes is a remake of Star Wars, or Star Wars is a remake of The Hills Have. Imagine Darth Vader being like, we are going to eat the flesh of Luke Skywalker. I mean, imagine, that would be so stupid. Although, and also, one of the characters is bald, so, I mean, the Emperor's bald, in a way, you know, and which, I will say, and like, one of the characters on the cover of all the movies is played by Michael Barron as Pluto, and they always used him because he looks scarier, and so when I first watched this movie, I actually saw the 2006 remake first originally, then I saw the 77 one, and I'm like, they don't look, I thought because you saw on the cover, oh, they all look like, they're all supposed to look monsterish. And I suspect, because there's dialogue in the movie, like, oh, you can't blend in with a normal person because you are so hideous. And I'm like, no, she doesn't. She could literally blend in. I mean, she does her hair and puts on normal clothing, you know, because right now they look like cavemen. Like, they all dress like cavemen for some reason. I don't know why. I'm like, then they say, and there's dialogue in the movie about how she's been robbing military bases. They've been robbing military bases. Like, first off, how have they not been caught? Because there's no way they could have crawled over those barbed wire fences to steal the gear. Secondly, which I think that's just exposition, explain why they have walkie-talkies. And secondly, if they've been robbing them, the military should easily have been able to find them and stop them because they're on feet in the middle of the desert and they're driving Humvees. So I'm just saying. You know, and also, I think Wes Craven wanted to make them look monsterish, but, like, I think because of the budget, so he's like, oh, well, we'll just put some teeth on them and mess up their hair and make them look creepy. And which, two or three of them look kind of monsters, like, they just like, but they really look like human beings just with messed up teeth and, you know, like a scar on their face, and that's it. And then one guy, Michael Berryman, looks like that in real life because he was born without sweat glances, and so he has, like, a hair loss deficiency, and so that's why he looks like that in real life. It's not makeup or nothing, he just looks like that in real life, you know. That's, but you know what, he's a great guy. I've heard at conventions people walk up there and talk to him and say, oh, he's a fantastic guy, really great. And Rob Zombie even put him in The Devil's Rejects. So I mean, if you ever see that, he's a good guy, you know. There is a sequel to this movie called The Hills Have Eyes 2, but it's not really a sequel. I mean, it is a sequel, like the first 20-30 minutes of the movie are a sequel. But then what happened is they ran out of money when they were shooting the movie. Wes Craven, I don't think, did direct the sequel. Someone else directed it. And so they ran out of money. So then the producer had an idea. Why don't we just reuse footage from the first movie? So that's why there's people that are dead in that movie that are dying in this movie. It's just stupid, really. It really is. And it's not really good. So I really wouldn't recommend watching it. Also, if you want to check it out, watch both versions. That's what I do. I watch both versions. I'm happy that this version exists, so we can get to this version. I hope they never remake it again, because I feel like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when you have something that's good, you shouldn't remake it again. Now, if it's bad, you can remake it, you know. But that's just my opinion. I mean, if I had to give this movie a grade, I would give this movie a C+. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Dave, from Interpreting the Stars. Give his channel, watch his channel. I'm going to put a link in the section below. Also, if you can, just give this video a like and thumbs up. Watch his videos. They're awesome. His thumbnails are kick-ass. We're going to try to have a review soon for the remake. And I still have my lineup of horror films coming up. Thank you all for watching. I love the comments I'm getting. And if you can, just fall down the rabbit hole for more. Goodbye. Thank you all so much for watching.
Terrifying film you will ever see by Wes Craven, writer and director of The Last House on the Left. The Hills Have Eyes. The lucky ones died first.